48 hours ago, I told you the United States gave Iran 10 days. Since then, both sides have been preparing for war in ways that most people have not seen. And today I have satellite imagery, military intelligence assessments, and leaked planning details that paint a picture far more dangerous than what any headline is telling you. Here is what happened in the last 48 hours. Iran has been racing to bury its most sensitive nuclear facilities underground before American bombs can reach them. New satellite images analyzed by the Institute for Science and International Security show construction crews working around the clock at 3 of Iran's most critical sites. At the same time, Iran launched joint naval exercises with Russia in the exact waters where American carrier strike groups are operating. Tehran sent a letter to the United Nations Security Council warning that any U.S. aggression will be met with a decisive and proportionate response, and that all American bases and assets in the region would become legitimate targets. On the American side, CNN is reporting that Trump's military options now range from targeted strikes on nuclear facilities to sustained operations lasting weeks, with some plans including the elimination of Tehran's top leadership. The Washington Post says the administration appears ready to launch an extended military assault. 50 fighter jets arrived this week. A second carrier is crossing the Atlantic. Poland is telling its citizens to leave Iran immediately. Germany is pulling troops out of Iraq. But there is one critical detail that no one is paying enough attention to. U.S. troops have not yet received a target list. According to CNN, that means Trump has not pulled the trigger. He has not made the final decision. And that makes right now, this exact moment, the most dangerous and unpredictable window in this entire crisis. Welcome to the sand table. This is briefing number 2. Let me start with what Iran is doing right now, because the satellite imagery tells a story that diplomats on both sides do not want you to see. Site number 1. Parchin Military Complex, 30 kilometers southeast of Tehran. This is one of Iran's most sensitive military installations. Western intelligence agencies have long suspected that Iran conducted nuclear weapons-related tests here more than 20 years ago. Israel bombed Parchin in October 2024. Here is what the satellites show. After the Israeli strike destroyed a rectangular building at Parchin, Iran began rebuilding. By October 2025, the skeleton of a new structure was visible. By November, a metallic roof appeared. By December, the facility was being covered. And by February 16, 2026, the entire building had vanished from satellite view. What happened? According to the Institute for Science and International Security, Iran constructed what analysts are calling a concrete sarcophagus around the facility and then buried it under soil. Inside this sarcophagus, imagery suggests there is a cylindrical chamber approximately 36 meters long and 12 meters in diameter. The Institute says this resembles a high explosives containment vessel, a structure that is, and I quote, critical to the development of nuclear weapons, though they note it could also be used for conventional weapons development. But here is the strategic calculation that matters. David Albright, the founder of the Institute, wrote on social media that stalling the negotiations has its benefits. Over the last 2 to 3 weeks, Iran has been busy burying this facility. It may soon become a fully unrecognizable bunker, providing significant protection from aerial strikes. In other words, every day that passes without a strike, Iran's defenses get stronger. Every day of negotiation is a day of construction. The diplomats buy time. The engineers use it. Site number 2, Isfahan Nuclear Complex. This is one of 3 Iranian uranium enrichment plants that the United States bombed during Operation Midnight Hammer last June. Isfahan is critically important because it contains an underground storage area where diplomats say much of Iran's enriched uranium is housed. Satellite images from late January showed new efforts to bury 2 tunnel entrances at the complex. By February 9th, a 3rd entrance had also been backfilled with soil. By February 10th, all 3 tunnel entrances were, according to analysts, completely buried. The Institute assessed that burying the tunnel entrances would help dampen any potential airstrike and also make ground access in a special forces raid to seize or destroy any highly enriched uranium extremely difficult. Let me translate what that means. If the United States wanted to repeat what it did last June, those tunnel entrances no longer exist. If Special Operations Forces wanted to go in and physically seize Iran's enriched uranium stockpile, the doorways are buried under tons of soil. Iran has not just rebuilt what was destroyed, it has made the rebuilt version harder to destroy again. Site number 3, the Natanz complex. specifically a facility called Pickaxe Mountain, an underground tunnel complex carved into a mountain approximately 2 kilometers from the main Natanz enrichment site. Since February 10th, satellite imagery shows ongoing efforts to harden and defensively strengthen 2 tunnel entrances. The images show numerous vehicles, including dump trucks, cement mixers, and other heavy equipment moving throughout the complex. Iran is pouring concrete into the mountain. The pattern across all 3 sites is identical: bury, harden, conceal. Iran is not passively waiting for negotiations to succeed. It is actively preparing to survive a strike. And every day the diplomatic clock ticks, these sites get deeper underground. Now let me show you what Iran did above ground this week, because while the construction crews work underground, Iran's military sent a very public message. On Thursday, February 19th, Iran launched joint naval exercises with Russia in the Gulf of Oman and the Indian Ocean. The Iranian state news agency reported that the drills focused on upgrading operational coordination and exchanging military experiences. Footage released by Iran showed Revolutionary Guard Naval Special Forces boarding a vessel during the exercise. These are the same forces believed to have been used to seize tankers in international waterways. Iran also issued a rocket fire warning to pilots in the region, suggesting it planned to launch anti-ship missiles during the exercise. Let me be clear about the timing. Iran is conducting naval exercises with Russia in the exact body of water where the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group is operating. And Iran is practicing anti-ship missile launches while threatening to sink American warships. But that is not all Russia did today. On the same day, 5 Russian military aircraft entered the Alaskan Air Defense Identification Zone. 2 Tu-95 strategic bombers, 2 Su-35 fighter jets, and 1 A-50 airborne early warning aircraft. NORAD scrambled 2 F-16s, 2 F-35s, an E-3 AWACS, and 4 KC-135 tankers to intercept and escort them out. Now, Russian flights near Alaska happen several times a year. NORAD says it is not considered a threat. But what matters is the timing. On the same day that Russia is conducting naval exercises with Iran in the waters where American carriers are operating, Russia sends nuclear-capable bombers toward Alaska. That is not a coincidence. That is a coordinated signal. Moscow is telling Washington, if you strike our partner in the south, remember that we can reach you in the north. This is not training. This is messaging on 2 fronts simultaneously. Now let me turn to the American side, because what is leaked from the Pentagon this week reveals the full range of what Trump is considering. CNN reported that Trump's options now range from more targeted strikes to sustained operations that could potentially last for weeks. Some plans include eliminating Tehran's leaders. Many of the options would be on a much larger scale than the hours-long bombing run that targeted Iranian nuclear facilities last summer during Operation Midnight Hammer. That operation lasted less than 30 minutes, according to the Pentagon. What is being planned now could last weeks. Let me break down the 5 options that sources familiar with the planning have described. Option 1. Limited nuclear strikes. Hit the nuclear sites that Iran is currently fortifying: Natanz, Isfahan, Parchin, and possibly the newly discovered Rainbow site in Semnan province. This is a repeat of Midnight Hammer, but bigger and deeper, targeting the underground facilities Iran has been hardening. Option 2. Nuclear plus missile infrastructure. Everything in Option 1 plus Iran's ballistic missile sites. Israel has been pushing this option aggressively. Netanyahu told Trump that destroying Iran's missile capability is just as important as its nuclear program. Iran has 25 primary missile bases. Satellite imagery shows some have been rebuilt since last year's war. Option 3. Extended air campaign. A sustained multi-week operation targeting military infrastructure across Iran, including air defenses, command and control networks, IRGC bases, and weapons production facilities. This would degrade Iran's ability to retaliate over time. Option 4. Decapitation strikes. Targeting Iran's top leadership, including potentially the supreme leader himself. CNN reported that Iran has appointed war veteran Ali Shamkhani to head a new defense council, a move analysts interpret as preparation for the possibility that Khamenei himself could be targeted. Iran is preparing for its own leader's potential death. That tells you how seriously Tehran takes this option. Option 5. Do nothing. Maintain the pressure, continue negotiations, and accept that Iran will continue fortifying its sites. This option becomes less viable every day as the satellite imagery shows Iran's defenses getting stronger. Two Trump advisors compared the current moment to both the decision to strike Iran last year and the capture of Venezuelan leader Maduro in January. In both cases, Trump went back and forth for weeks before deciding shortly before giving the order. This week, Trump has privately argued both for and against military action, polling advisors and allies on the best course. But here is the critical detail. According to CNN, U.S. troops have not yet received a target list for potential strikes on Iran. That is the clearest sign that Trump has not yet pulled the trigger on ordering a specific military operation. A target list is the final step before execution. Everything before it is preparation. Everything after it is countdown. White House officials say he continues to prefer a diplomatic solution. But many now say they see diminishing prospects of an agreement that satisfies all of the president's demands. Now let me show you what Iran told the United Nations this week because it reveals Tehran's strategic calculation. Iran's ambassador to the UN, Amir Saeed Iravani, sent a letter to the Security Council stating that Iran neither seeks tension nor war and will not initiate any war. But he added that if Iran were attacked, it would consider all bases, facilities, and assets of the hostile force in the region as legitimate targets. He specifically called out Trump's threat to use Diego Garcia, the joint U.S.-British military base in the Indian Ocean, warning that such statements must not be treated as mere rhetoric. And he urged the Security Council to condemn what he described as a real risk of military aggression. This letter does two things. First, it establishes a legal and diplomatic framework for retaliation. By stating Iran will not initiate war but will respond to aggression, Tehran is positioning itself as the defender. Second, by explicitly naming all bases and assets as legitimate targets, Iran is warning every country hosting American forces that they could become targets too. Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, Iraq, UAE, and now Diego Garcia. This is Iran telling America's partners, your territory is in the crosshairs. Now let me explain the 4 calendar events that are shaping Trump's decision timeline, because the next 10 days are not just about military readiness. Politics, diplomacy, and optics are all converging. Event 1. The Winter Olympics end this Sunday, February 22nd. Multiple European officials told CNN they believe no strike will occur before the Olympics conclude. The Olympics are traditionally a moment of global unity, and launching a war during them would create enormous diplomatic backlash. Event 2. Ramadan began on Wednesday, February 19th. Officials from U.S. allies in the Middle East have lobbied against an attack during the Muslim holy month, arguing it would convey American disrespect and inflame public opinion across the Islamic world. Iran shares this calculation, which may be why its diplomats are emphasizing guiding principles and progress at the same time its military is burying nuclear sites. Event 3. Trump's State of the Union address is scheduled for Tuesday, February 24th. Aides have said it will likely act as a kickoff for Trump's midterm year message on domestic issues. Some officials believe Trump would prefer to deliver the State of the Union before making a final decision on Iran, using the speech either to announce a diplomatic breakthrough or to prepare the American public for military action. Event 4. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is scheduled to travel to Israel on February 28th to meet with Netanyahu and update him on the Iran talks. If Rubio is still planning a trip to Israel on the 28th, that suggests the administration does not expect strikes before that date. Or it could mean Rubio's trip is the final coordination meeting before a joint U.S.-Israeli operation. These 4 events create a window. The earliest likely date for strikes, based on these constraints, is after February 24th, after the State of the Union. The latest date Trump has given himself is 10 to 15 days from yesterday, which puts the deadline around March 1st to March 5th. But there is a 5th event that happened today that could change everything, and it has nothing to do with Iran. This morning, the United States Supreme Court struck down Trump's tariff program in a 6-3 ruling. Chief Justice John Roberts wrote that the president does not have the authority to impose tariffs under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. This is not a minor procedural setback. This is the biggest legal defeat of Trump's second term. The ruling voids the majority of tariffs Trump imposed throughout 2025, tariffs that generated over $160 billion in revenue. Importers may now be entitled to refunds totaling up to $175 billion. Within hours of the ruling, Trump announced a new 10% global tariff, effectively telling the Supreme Court he does not intend to back down. He called the justices disloyal to the Constitution. This is a president who is now simultaneously fighting the Supreme Court over his economic agenda and preparing for a potential war with Iran. Here is why this matters for the Iran crisis. History shows that when American presidents suffer major domestic defeats, they often turn to foreign policy for a decisive win. A successful military operation against Iran would dominate the news cycle, rally public support, and shift the narrative away from the tariff defeat. Trump needs a win. Iran is the most available one. There is also a practical dimension. Those tariffs were generating $30 billion per month in revenue. If refunds are ordered, the Treasury takes a massive hit. A military operation, especially one that secures a favorable deal with Iran, would give Trump leverage to argue that his foreign policy strength compensates for the court's interference in his economic policy. I am not saying the Supreme Court ruling will cause a strike on Iran. I am saying it changes the political calculation. A president who is weighing the costs and benefits of military action just had the cost of inaction go up. Now let me tell you what Iran fears most, because it is not American bombs. 4 current Iranian officials told Reuters that high-level officials warned Supreme Leader Khamenei that public anger over the regime's brutal crackdown on the January protests has reached a point where fear is no longer a deterrent. They told Khamenei that a U.S. strike on Iran could embolden Iranians to resume protesting and inflict irreparable damage to the political establishment. One official stated that a U.S. attack combined with renewed protests could cause the regime to collapse, and that this is the main concern among senior Iranian officials. This is the dimension that changes everything. Iran is not just calculating military survival, it is calculating political survival. The regime killed thousands of its own people in January. The 40th day mourning ceremonies on February 16th and 17th turned into renewed political protests across multiple cities. Women led the demonstrations. Prisoners are sending messages from behind bars calling for resistance. The regime even admitted publicly this week that security forces executed wounded protesters, confirming what opposition groups had documented. If American strikes hit Iran while the population is already on the edge of revolt, the combination could be existential for the Islamic Republic. This is why Iran's negotiating position is more complicated than it appears. Tehran cannot simply reject Trump's demands, because rejection means strikes, and strikes plus protests could mean the end of the regime. But Tehran also cannot accept Trump's full demands, because dismantling its nuclear and missile programs would leave it permanently vulnerable. Iran is trapped, and trapped regimes are unpredictable. Let me now give you the current force map as of today, February 20th. The USS Abraham Lincoln remains in the Arabian Sea with Carrier Strike Group 3, approximately 700 kilometers from Iran's southern coast. The USS Gerald R. Ford was spotted off the coast of Morocco on Wednesday, crossing the Atlantic. Tracking data suggests the Ford will transit through the Strait of Gibraltar and could station in the eastern Mediterranean. At least 3 littoral combat ships are in the region. 2 guided missile destroyers are in the Persian Gulf near the Strait of Hormuz. A guided missile destroyer is in the Red Sea. 50 combat aircraft, F-35s, F-22s, and F-16s, arrived this week and are integrating into theater operations. Additional air defense systems and submarines are en route. An E-3 Sentry airborne warning and control system aircraft has been deployed, providing the battlefield surveillance platform needed to coordinate a large-scale air campaign. And if B-2 stealth bombers begin moving to Diego Garcia, that would signal a potential replay of Midnight Hammer. Germany has moved non-essential personnel out of Iraq. Poland has told its citizens to leave Iran. The pieces are moving into position. So here is where we stand. Iran is burying its nuclear sites as fast as it can. The United States is assembling the largest strike force in the Middle East in 22 years. Trump has not yet decided. No target list has been sent. The Olympics end Sunday. The State of the Union is Tuesday. Rubio meets Netanyahu on the 28th. Iran's population is a powder keg, and the diplomatic window closes around March 1st. We are in the most dangerous 10-day period in the Middle East since the lead-up to the Iraq War. I will be here every day tracking what moves. If you watch briefing number 1, you already know more than most people paying attention. If you are new, go watch it now. The link is in the description. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because when the decision comes, it will come fast, and I want you to understand what it means before anyone else explains it to you. I will see you at the next briefing.